All right, well, I call this meeting to order. Liz, do you want to do roll?
Sure, yeah. Dawn? Sandy's not here. Elena?
Here.
Ecola?
Here.
Jamie Martin?
Here.
Leslie?
I'm here.
And Walt?
Here.
Marcia will be late. Jerry Stranick is not present. Allison, can you hear us online?
Yes.
Vivian will not be here tonight, and Chris is not in attendance either.
Okay, so tonight, in your packet, that's the commercial business district land use and review. And so tonight we can go through each of these and just, say yes or no, whether we agree to keep it in or don't think it should be in there. And maybe a few comments and notes. If that's, has everybody had a chance to review this?
No.
Okay. Right. Well, let's get to it. The first one in residential land use types, accessory structure on an unoccupied lot without main building.
If you don't mind, if I jump in real quick, just
Okay.
when looking at this table, I do want to make sure that we point out that this is the current existing code, the way it is. Chair Sweet put this table together for the group in hopes that it just takes the land use and the definition and combines them so that you can see both together. And then under use, that column N, P, and S, if you look at the top, the key is P is for permitted, S is for secondary, C is for conditional, and N is for not permitted. So as Chair Martin mentioned, accessory structure on an unoccupied lot without main building is the first land use type, and according to current existing code, it is not a permitted use. So that would mean greenhouses, shed, some kind of a secondary use that is, playhouse. You can see below in the definition too under accessory use or structure. And it's a detached structure such as, but not limited to, garages, sheds, playhouses, storage buildings, pergola, I can't say that word, and I think garden was supposed to have something beyond that, not just garden itself. So with that in mind, the exercise for the table, as Chair Martin mentioned, is it's like a yes, that makes sense, and then we move through, or no, this needs more discussion, and then that helps bring focus back at the next meeting or upcoming meetings of what land uses really need, and we can discuss them all, but where to start with the primary focus of the group for allowable uses or unallowable uses in the district itself.
I'd like to just jump in real fast, and I hate that this is the very first one and that I have a potential issue, but I don't see a spot where you could have an accessory structure, a different name for it, where a business is in that structure. I do think we should allow accessory structures if it is operating a business in the commercial business zone.
Thank you. If you don't mind, to the chair, that's an excellent question. So it does state in our water and sewer utility code that a structure that is, there's a difference because that's an occupied structure. And so maybe that does need to be worked on. I can make a note on here to make sure, when it becomes occupied, it follows under different rules because it has to have water and sewer, unless there's an exception. And it has I think if you look at a detached structure, garages, sheds, playhouses, storage buildings, the accessory is not a structure that's going to be occupied. And maybe that needs to be clarified better, or it can be changed if that's just the intent at this point.
Is it occupied if no one lives there and they're just running a daytime business?
Yes, that's considered an occupancy because it's being utilized for a purpose with somebody in the space for a designated purpose. And we can pull up that code, what it is in Title 13.
Okay. And the only one I could think of that might be an example would be next to the pavilion. There is a structure there, and I would consider calling it an accessory structure. I don't know what else it would be called under these definitions, but if he were to run a business out of that building, I think it should be allowed since he is in a commercial business district with a accessory structure.
Are you talking about the warehouse?
Yeah. What would you, yeah.
I mean, we do
I don't know
have
what
a
it is.
warehouse as a use,
I don't know what he uses it for.
He uses it for, excuse me, this is Leslie, he uses it for storage for Susie's business
Okay.
and all of their potting soil and just general things like that, I think. Except
Okay.
some potting soil on pallets out there and
So if they're having an accessory structure to a business, do we want that in the commercial business district? Or not? I mean, we're in the commercial business district and we're wanting to support businesses.
Could you say that again? It collided,
So we're discussing the accessory structure,
right?
which Heidi said he classifies that one specifically as a warehouse. And that his warehouse is a storage of commercial goods for time on the boardwalk.
Right.
And that is a great business for Sildovia. Do we
Right.
want to be able to allow his structure in the commercial business district instead of it's currently classified as not permitted as an accessory structure or as a warehouse?
Yes, if I may interrupt, it's not an accessory structure. It is a warehouse.
Okay.
So it is a separate thing, but they are both not permitted, correct? So when we get to it. That helps.
Allison, did you have a comment?
Yeah, accessory versus main, is it based on the size it occupies? How do you determine if there's no main building that something's accessory?
Through the chair, so that would be a standalone guard, so take a vacant lot in any of these districts, there's one, for instance, besides, maybe,
Trading
yes.
Post.
Yeah, and if they wanted to just build a shed or a playhouse, some kind of a outbuilding that's not occupied according to Title 13. And we have been trying to make our definitions, exist across titles, but we look at occupied as reside or have one's place of business in a building. So we're saying an accessory structure in an unoccupied lot being a building or structure that is accessory to a main use and could include the definition occupied if it needs to help further that. So storage buildings, playhouses, sheds, garages. It's a secondary use to the whatever main purpose would be there.
Do we have a definition for a main building that doesn't have a designated current use? Like it's not a residence, it's not necessarily a restaurant, it's not a hotel, but it could operate a business out of it. Do we have a definition that would fit that?
No, because they all have a classification at this point.
If we had a definition for that type of building, then I would love for that type of building to be able to operate a business in the district. And then I'm completely okay with accessory structure not being permitted.
Add that in there.
I did want to note that Jerry Stranick and Chris Lethine were online as well.
Could that simply be primary structure?
Could I say something? We have a real shortage of storage. And I see you we can't have any mini warehouses and it's very difficult to run any kind of business without some kind of support area. So I would be in favor of giving him our blessing and say, leave it. I would want to say yes on that.
We'll have to get to that though, because he's not considered an accessory structure, which is my mistake.
What's that?
That his building's not considered an accessory structure, which was my mistake.
Okay, what is it considered, Heidi?
A warehouse.
A warehouse.
Yep, by the definition of warehouse.
And warehouse is not acceptable either? Did I hear you say? Okay.
So does it sound like from the group that there needs to be further discussion as we move through this process on accessory use in the district? Because we do have, Elena's right, principal use or structure, which means the major or predominant uses or structures of a lot or parcel, with which the district is primarily designated. So maybe that needs to be evaluated as well.
I just wanted to make sure we had a space. So if somebody wanted to come in and build a summertime structure,
Mhm.
whatever that is, and run a business out of it, that we have something that they could fit under. And we're
Yes.
not saying that they're not allowed.
Right.
And if they just had a summertime like pergola that they had a gift shop out of,
Right.
currently it would not be allowed.
Well, it would be retail then, right? If they're doing a retail sales, that would be the use type. I mean, that's the, they're gonna have a business service and that service is the type.
Right. Yes.
Okay. If there's anything further on that one, it looks like that'll be a discuss. We can bring back some examples of other definitions to help tie it in together. And if we come up with examples of things that don't meet the needs under land use, looking at what that would look like being a principal use building or a main building.
That'd be great.
Okay, accessory use structure, this is a permitted for a detached structure such as not limited to garages, sheds, playhouses, storages, buildings, pergolas, I can't say that word. Garden, and that is with a main building on the lot. So if you have a building, can you have a shed,
Yes.
storage building, such to go with that building, and that is currently permitted.
I agree.
Does anybody disagree with that one?
Consensus of yes. Okay, moving to dwelling units. So attached residential, this is in here specifically because of the commercial business district. And it's an apartment in a commercial building limited to 1 unit. Currently, that's considered a secondary use because the primary use is the business portion of the building. Secondary being the portion that is the dwelling unit that's lived in. So it is labeled as S secondary.
This is Dawn. And so when we were reviewing this, my opinion is that we definitely, if we're not going to talk about it today, we need to come back to coming up with an appropriate definition for dwelling. And I think that that might clarify a lot of confusion by doing so. And eliminating a lot of the dwelling uses throughout this. I think you could simplify it considerably if you went and looked at what the definition is currently saying and changing it to what is actually in the building code, what the state of Alaska uses, what the international building codes use for a definition. It kind of looks like it's maybe just been tweaked a little bit through the years, probably to fit different things. And maybe if we came back to something that was more in line with all of the other regulations that businesses have to fall under through insurance, through building codes. Like that, I think, clarify.
Anything?
Dwelling, yeah, the definition. Are we gonna talk about definitions or do we just want to come back to that one?
If you have something handy, I can write it in the notes.
So the definition of a dwelling is a house, apartment, or other place of residence. So as it is being used as a residence or a place where one lives is one of the definitions that is used. And pretty much even if when you go into the actual building codes, so the international building code, a building that contains one or two uses intended or designated to be used, rented, leased, let out, hired, or occupied for living purposes. And so I think a lot of the confusion, if you look under, it's defined under residential land uses for dwelling, but we're using dwelling as also a nightly rental definition and other definitions throughout this. And really a dwelling unit is not necessarily a nightly rental. That is a different thing. And so I think we're taking dwelling unit and using it in more places maybe than what we should.
Can I have a follow-up, Chair?
Go ahead.
Just thinking through that, so then would there be a need for, and of course, we can bring this back at another meeting and have a more thorough discussion on it, but a need for a definition for residence versus nightly rental then, because you can have a residential building that is a nightly rental, and you can have a residential building that's a dwelling unit. I don't know. I don't know if you've had any thought into that, but I'm trying to work my brain around it.
So, yes, have had some thoughts about that. So to speak specifically to my current situation, what I have at the Harbor Inn is one dwelling unit, which is a residence, full-time, we can call it non-transient, long-term rental, but it is a residence because somebody is living there more than 30 days. Then I have a lodge that is a 3-bedroom lodge that is nightly rentals, that is transient. So in my opinion, that is how mine, based on definitions, it should be looked at. Whether that's what's agreed to or not, I don't know, but that is my opinion. That when you start talking about nightly rentals, you're no longer talking about a dwelling. A dwelling is a home meant for families, meant for long term. So then you start talking about lodges. The one thing that a dwelling does take into account that you have to be careful of, and I'm skipping forward, but is bed and breakfast, because bed and breakfasts are regulated by the state of Alaska based on a primary residence, and you're doing a bed and breakfast within that primary residence, which would be a dwelling. So then you would fit under that because it is your primary dwelling. So that's where bed and breakfast would fit in. But lodges, motels, hotels, inns is another, you're looking at the International Building Code that is a nightly rental that wouldn't fall under the dwelling.
Mhm.
And they actually have. And I don't want to get
Yeah.
sidetracked going into this, but I think that until you come up with what you're going to actually use for definition for dwelling,
Mhm.
it's pretty hard to go down the rest of these.
Yeah, so X on all of those that we further discussion. Is that fair to the group? Please,
Yes.
for dwelling units. Same notes. And then if there isn't anything further on dwelling units, from the room or online. Is it, did you? Hand raise over there. Mobile homes. And right now they're currently not permitted, and that definition is a factory assembled structure or combination thereof, which contains the necessary service connections to separate one or more dwelling units, is made so as to be readily movable as a unit or units on individual chassis or in running gear, which is designed to be used without a permanent foundation. And it's not.
I'm just thinking of like in the commercial business district, where is there a lot where anybody could even put a mobile home? So I think
It may not currently be an issue, but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it couldn't be a potential
Yeah.
one in the future. And I'm happy to not allow mobile homes in the commercial business
Mhm.
district.
I agree. It's hard to get a mobile home when we're gonna start with.
Okay, so that one is a yes, unless there's any differing opinions.
Does a mobile home change if you put it on a foundation? Does it turn into a main building?
I really liked what Dawn had to say about just verifying definitions, and this one makes me feel like even though that's acceptable as not permitted, that we should just verify what that definition looks like and go through that process. Okay, so I'll make a note.
I might say one more thing, we have to be a little bit careful there because, and I don't know Alaska law, but when you ground set a mobile, depending on the mobile home people in Alaska, they go to bat for that. And I guess you'd almost need an opinion of attorney if you're trying to exclude someone out. And maybe it's against the law to exclude them out. I don't know. I know in New Mexico, under certain rules, you cannot exclude a mobile home if it's ground set to certain standards. I don't know about Alaska, but
Do have permitted zones where they are allowed.
that's the point, is they've gone before the legislature and in different states and say, hey, we basically have the same structure, but we build it a different place and move it in. All I would do is caution, I'm not in favor of mobile homes, but I would say I'd be a little cautious. I might want to get my advice from my attorney before I put it in writing as to if you're going to disqualify them, so you might avoid a future lawsuit from someone that might insist on putting one. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, would RVs fall under this mobile home definition, or is that considered different?
Those are considered different. Those are recreational vehicle.
Okay.
That's a whole another animal.
Okay, good, because I can foresee people wanting to park those in their driveways.
So on that note, mobile home parks not permitted. No mobile homes, no mobile home parks. Is that? So, yep, that's fine the way it sits, unless there's any differing opinions. Moving down.
Yes. Oh, here we go. I have, yeah, it's, so mobile home says it's going to be used as a residence, but you could have a mobile building that is used as a occupied as a business. Like, I mean, somebody could move in. What do they call those things? You know, they use them on construction sites all the time.
Mhm.
Is that going to be another category that we already, that is in here? That's mobile home means residence or mobile building, I guess. I just was wondering if that is a different thing or, yeah.
This is Dawn. So I was looking at the definition of a mobile home, which is number 70 on page 24. So it's actually, if you read through it, it says a factory assembled structure or combination thereof, which contains the necessary service connection to support one or more dwelling units. It is made so as to readily movable as a unit or units on an individual chassis and running gear, and which is designed to be used without a permanent foundation. So I don't think that. I mean, are you talking about the ADCO buildings that contractors come in and use? Because they would definitely fall under a mobile home.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of as they use it.
Based on 70, the definition here for mobile home. That is exactly what ADCO building is, but it's also for temporary housing there. But sometimes in Alaska, they make them permanent for years. So, but to me, it would fall definitely under this. It's on a chassis, it's movable, it's basically a mobile home that's not. It's a lower level mobile home. Maybe doesn't have wallpaper in it, something like that. In my opinion.
Okay, anything further on mobile homes or mobile home parks? Okay, I'm going under commercial use land types, dwelling unit, nightly rental. I am guessing as from the previous conversation about dwelling unit definitions that one needs to be evaluated. Any notes or differing opinions, comments on that?
I'm happy to have it evaluated.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we got stuck on that last meeting, but definitely, I think we're all in agreement that that needs to be reevaluated.
Bed and breakfast is not currently in the code. This one does not have a definition but it was bed and breakfast, I should say, is in the land use table, but it doesn't have a definition, and that was one of the proposed changes through the recent ordinance went through planning commission. So I would ask the group if they want to entertain a definition for bed and breakfast in the future to be included. Is it necessary? Sounds like there's some differentiations between that and the nightly rental because of the fact that it is occupied space.
So this is Dawn. I would suggest that we use the state of Alaska's definition of bed and breakfast for permitting purposes.
Don, do you have that definition on hand?
On me right here, I don't. Well,
No,
maybe
it's
I
okay.
do. Just a second, I might.
So currently, if bed and breakfast is in the land use table, it has a secondary use. So that would mean like they're running a bed and breakfast out of their upstairs while living on the property, renting rooms, but downstairs or half of the building having its own business.
I don't agree with that understanding of it, because to me, it becomes a primary use. the minute that you make it be a bed and breakfast, because in order to be a bed and breakfast, which is a business, you have to have a primary residence in there. So that to me is saying that that is the primary use, but that maybe could be up for discussion. But once you have you have to have a dwelling, be able to have a bed and breakfast.
Right.
Bed and breakfast is a business, but it is all encompassing. So to me,
Right.
it is your primary use. Once it becomes a bed and breakfast, I don't, because you can't have a bed and breakfast without a primary dwelling, which is according to the definitions that I would go with, is a residence. So you have to have one to have the other, so it becomes a primary. I think that you don't have to split up, but that's just my opinion. That isn't what it says or anything. but-
Can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
So in that, knowing that dwelling units themselves are supposed to be a secondary purpose,
Mhm.
so. I guess what you're saying is if somebody built a single home or had a single dwelling unit in their. In the zone
Mhm.
and lived in it and then operated that unit as. A bed and breakfast, then that would be an allowable.
I think most definitely.
Okay.
I mean. Yep. Because you have to pull in this, what constitutes a bed and breakfast for the state of Alaska as far as permitting goes, and I'm looking for that, I had it. I can send it to because I can't just send it to her, so I'll send it to Heidi and then.
Yeah, we can just,
But it's all part of the permitting for bed and breakfast in the state of Alaska.
yeah,
But yeah, I will make a note to send that definition.
So this Walt, like when the first meeting, you said you wanted to do a Airbnb. Is that like an air bed and breakfast? What does Airbnb stand for?
You should serve one or more, or one meal a day is a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
If you're. I think people get things confused with bed and breakfast and Airbnbs. Because
Well,
everybody says, I'm renting through Airbnb, it's not the same thing.
It's just a platform, an online platform
got you.
that shows.
I didn't know if it meant a certain bed and breakfast, because it seems to me like if you met your initial use, say whether it's a lodge, like in your instance, you've already met the primary use as a lodge. See, and then you have dwellings upstairs, seem like you'd want that flexibility to do Airbnb or bed and breakfast upstairs or whatever you wanted, because you've already met the primary. Am I right? Or
Yeah. The only thing that yes, I agree with that. The only thing that's different is for the definition for bed and breakfast.
Oh,
Like
okay.
true bed and breakfast is a little bit different, and so you have to have, according to have a true bed and breakfast, there's a specific definition that the state of Alaska uses for permitting purposes, and I think it's important that we use that. And part of that definition includes a primary residence, or I don't think we use the word primary, it has to be occupied residence or something like that. So I don't want to speak out of turn. I will clean out the definition.
thank you. Yeah, because I think it'd be helpful to see that, because you could still have, I think. From what I'm used to hearing from Walt, and that's where my mind went, is that if you have a building and it has both a residence and a commercial space, then. Yeah, it'd be good to see the definition. Thank you. Okay, anything else on bed and breakfast? Bed and breakfast, any from anybody online? Anybody in the room? Okay, we'll bring back definitions for that. Business consumer service, the provision of services to others on fee or contract basis, such as but not limited to advertising and mailing, building maintenance, employment service, management and consulting service, protective service, equipment rental and leasing, commercial research, development and testing, photo finishing, and personal applied services, and that's currently a permitted use.
This is Dawn, that's a lot of words. So, I mean, and that is the thing that becomes a problem, is when you, in my opinion, when you start trying to cover all of your bases, you end up hindering yourself and others in doing so, and so to me, it's pretty simple, it's in business, so then you come back to defining what is in business, as long as it's a legal business. Maybe we need to step back on that one and come up with a really good definition of business and in business. Because it is two different things. And I think that that also would be the same thing with the dwelling. Once you come up with a good legal definition and not trying to reinvent the definition, I think that it might clarify a lot of things going down.
Anything else for business consumer services?
I don't have anything.
Business personal service, then the conduct of a business providing services involving the care of a person or his or her apparel, such as but not limited to dressmaking, tailoring, barbers, and beauty.
And I guess I would like to ask the question, what is really the difference between those two when you start lining them all up?
So these definitions did come from Seward, I believe, originally, and definitions that are utilized in their community. And I think some of the other communities in the area also utilize similar definitions. And that the difference being one being service-based, business consumer service, and the other personal service related to the care of a person or his apparel. Those seem to be the only differences. So
maybe there's a chance we can relook at those and combine or maybe take out some of the.
I agree that those could be combined just to make things a little easier to understand.
anything else for business personal services?
I do think we should evaluate the definitions. I also do think that businesses should be permitted in the commercial business district.
Yes. So keeping them as permitted the way they are.
Yeah.
Anything for anybody online or anybody else in the room? Then moving down to cabin rentals. This is actually one that was recommended to be removed in the ordinance put forth. And that is cabin rentals, the renting out of one or more individual detached dwelling units or buildings to provide overnight sleeping accommodations for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. Sounds like this may be addressed if the dwelling unit and nightly rental definitions are addressed.
Yeah. That was my thoughts.
And I would like to add that if we do include, if it's allowed for to have structures besides the main structure be livable and be nightly, rentals, that we clean up the way that reads an accessory structure, because right now accessory structure says they cannot be a living abode.
Yeah, I don't know how we do that by definition. I agree. I currently, like, my only inputs are coming from what I can see in that is currently happening in our commercial business district. And for example, my building has an accessory structure that is a garage. And I am happy to keep it as an accessory structure, but if finances ever permitted, or if we got to that point where we needed more accommodation, it would be great to be able to turn that accessory structure into a separate detached cabin rental. And I don't know,
But at that point, it would become another
just
dwelling
entity
or
in my
nightly rental or
thing.
something, if we
right.
those, if we adjust those so that we're not nitpicking at language.
I know.
Right.
So I think that it's.
It would no
because
longer
an
be
accessory
accessory.
structure to me is not, an accessory structure is not a something that you would rent, something that a dry cabin or any, I
Right.
think it's just not.
You wouldn't occupy it.
Right,
Right.
that's not what an accessory structure is, according to the definition here.
So maybe just a note that you need to have everything hooked up and be up to code if you want to have an accessory structure be livable. I don't know.
Well, I think it
you
just
don't
changes
call it an
definition
accessory
then.
Structure anymore.
Right.
Right.
It would just
So-
change it.
Because you can't live
Definition.
in or
Right.
occupy a space that doesn't have water and sewer. So when you put water and sewer in it and you designate a space for living or conducting businesses, it's no longer an accessory.
Right.
Kind of falls under that in a lodge, which is similar. You're renting building rooms, and it allows for a separate building or group of buildings.
Yeah.
So it seemed like it should be allowed
Mhm.
one way or the other. I mean, 'cause I guess we could carry multiple definitions of our business, maybe
Right,
Uh,
and that's
lodge.
why I'm hoping that we can maybe get rid of
simplify it.
some of these, like a cabin rental. And clarify it maybe under a nightly rental.
Yeah.
Or a long-term rental rather than trying to define all these little things that the names get changed here and there, but there are some things. That are clearly defined that do need to be in here, and bed and breakfast is one, and actually lodge is one. Based on building codes. So.
Anything else for cabin rentals?
So are we saying that we're going to change it from conditional to permitted, or are we saying
Revisiting that one, right?
we're going to revisit it again?
Yes, I
Or-
think what
okay.
my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we may not need this definition any longer as if it's met under dwelling unit and nightly rental definition.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or lodge.
it-
It sounds like it could fit under lodge as well,
There
depending
you
on
go.
how.
And that is permitted under lodge, so,
Yes,
okay.
so potentially removing it.
But only if it's covered.
Yeah.
By one or the other, so not removing it, like making it to where if somebody happened to have a cabin right now, that they wouldn't be able to. Only remove it if they would then fall under a new definition. So it would still be permitted.
Anything else for cabin rentals? Okay, commercial recreation, a recreation facility operated as a business and open to the public for a fee, especially for recreational participation such as, but not limited to arcades, bowling alley, dance club, laser tag, paintball, and skate park.
This is Dawn, to me, that would potentially fall if we kind of combine some things that is in business. Based on a business definition.
And it's, and it's entertainment use is the one underneath it. And then commercial recreation, you could even like combine those because instead of having two separate definitions, I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be permitted. I'm just saying, you know, you could combine those two because they're both, well, recreation and entertainment, it's kind of the same thing. Just we may not have to list every single thing that you can do, but just combine them and then
Agreed. On the land use
reduce.
table, they have all of the same not permitted, permitted, and not permitted uses together. If that makes sense. They are not permitted in the residential. They are permitted in WCR for both across.
And so that's a really good point, is that when we're saying combine things, we have to be really careful that we don't negatively impact one of these other zones, and it can happen to you really. But that being said, what was interesting to me is that when you look at this and you go through and you highlight it, it started out, so even though you're clearly defining through the different zoning districts, then it says residential land use types in the top, and then you go to commercial land use types. That was another question I had. Why do we have those headings when we're defining if it's permitted or not? And maybe I'm just missing something over in your land use table. You know how it.
Yes, I know what
Can
you're,
you,
yes, so,
because that's kind of confusing to me, but actually it is what made me look at that dwelling units and all of those definitions are under the residential land use types. And then you only had one dwelling unit, nightly rentals under commercial land use types when it's for the heading. So I think maybe you remove those headings because you're already defining it in your table. And then it's all one rather than having it almost look like it's separate things within the land use table.
okay. Anything else then for entertainment uses or headings? I make that note. Thank you.
I learned that maybe I shouldn't have big flashing lights.
Under next one, garage commercial, any garage other than a residential garage for commercial use operated for gain, which is used for storage, repair, rental, greasing, washing, servicing, adjusting, or equipping of automobiles or other vehicles. And currently that's a conditional use, which would mean that if somebody wanted to operate a garage as a business, they would put in an application to the planning commission and notice would go out to all the neighboring properties for 300 feet. And that application would include why is that my mind just blinking? That application would include the justification for that use.
I just have paperwork questions. So then how is that approved or is it through a vote? Does it go to the city council?
It can go to the city council if there isn't a quorum for the planning commission, but as long as there's a quorum of the vote it requires a 3+1 majority +1 according to code, then it can be approved through the planning commission. It's a way of providing public notice and public input for the individuals in the area. And there is a list of set questions in the code that they just kind of have to meet those questions for that purpose.
So as long as they meet those guidelines, then it would be permitted.
Correct.
Okay, Because that's something that I think always plays a part both for the city and time and things like that, whenever you have a conditional use, making sure that you have a clear way of getting to the end product and knowing what the timeline is of that.
Yes.
Especially for somebody that's if they're trying to buy a piece of property, if they're trying to start a new business and need to get loans to do so, they need to know timelines and things like that. And so maybe that's already in there, but I just wanted, yeah.
According to
something-
the conditional use procedure, from the time they give application, we have 30 days to put out the notice and arrange the meeting.
Okay.
So it's time specific.
Okay.
It's also use specific, property specific. So if that individual sells or it changes hands or they do something differently with it, then that use is no longer, they'd have to start the process over again because it's.
So if it was an existing.
It's different than a variance.
Right, so that, I guess I can. Speak to this, if you were going to say, put in, like a boat and motor shop would fall into this.
Mhm.
So if you were gonna do a motor repair shop or something like that, and you go and you get the conditional use permit and you put the money in to build this business.
Mhm.
That is now operating, if you want to sell it, that conditional use doesn't go with it. The new owner would have to reapply.
I believe it.
Sorry, boat repair I don't think would fall under that. I think marine equipment sales, service and repair. It's its own.
So maybe
I think it's just for auto.
So maybe
I
that
think
was
it's just
a
for
wrong.
vehicles.
just auto. Or other equipment, other vehicles, automobiles or other vehicles.
And I had a question about the commercial garage.
Yeah.
In that, how is it very different from automotive repair, service and sales? I think the only difference would be the selling of the vehicle. But you're still repairing and servicing.
This garage commercial, let's look at what the definition. Commercial, any garage other than a residential garage for commercial use operated for gain. Is used for storage, repair, rental, greasing, washing, servicing, adjusting or equipment of automobiles or other vehicles. Okay,
Those
so
are very
I
similar.
shouldn't do the boat motor wouldn't be a good example. I
No.
got off base, so even in auto, so even if somebody put in, if they conditionally got this approved, what I want to know is then. Does that conditional approval go with it after the sale of the property?
Yeah, it would be when that use ended. So if somebody purchased the property
They
and
could continue
changed
to
the,
use it.
yeah, but if they changed the use, they bought it and said, no, now I want this garage to be a doctor's office.
Got it. Okay, that's all I.
Then
I
it's a
didn't-
doctor's
sure.
office. And if you want to go back to the automobile shop,
So once you're conditionally approved, you would
Mm-hmm.
be conditionally approved even after the sale of the property, as long as it remained the same business as what was originally purchased.
Mhm.
Okay. I've no issue with that.
Is it possible for that to just be permitted? What are the concerns? Why is it conditional?
currently it's conditional for the public process. And yeah, I think that's open for discussion for the group. I mean, the conditional use is a great way to allow, if there's any potential concerns or conflicts with neighboring properties, an awareness. It actually, unless that person can provide justification why it shouldn't be there, legal justification, it really isn't going to change the outcome of the argument, most likely, because they're meeting the needs, unless the individual who's coming in from the public can prove and justify why they wouldn't meet why that conditional use could be permitted. It's going to be permitted because they meet the justifications. So really, when you think about conditional uses, those are the uses that impact a district that may, or a neighborhood that individuals in the neighborhood may just want to have an awareness that that is happening and have a say and be able to be a part of the process.
I would say that probably part of the reason for the conditional use originally for that is that you will have more traffic, you will have more parking, you will have to establish that you have enough parking to maintain that business.
Okay, I was curious about that, or whether it was more towards like, you know, management of toxic materials and such.
That too. I mean, it's all part of the application process is how that business is going to be managed. And you can go back, like, for instance, even Avery's, like beekeeping is a conditional use. And through that, it's set out, you know, part of that process is making sure they have electric fences, that they're so high up, that they're so far away from other neighboring properties. You know, it's definitely a safety component is considered as well. I'm happy that it can stay as conditional.
Yep, same.
Just gives us another look at it.
And maybe reminding people that they need additional permits because I believe that they do.
That too. Anything else for garage commercial? Anybody online? Anybody else in the room?
I liked Acola's notice of, you know, those two definitions are very similar. Could they be combined? The automotive repair, sales and services, and the garage. Yep.
There's nothing else on that. Then we'll go to home occupation. Any use entirely within a dwelling or accessory structure, and that should be probably changed because of the accessory definition. And carried on by occupants of the dwelling unit, which is clearly incidental to the use of the dwelling and lot of residential purposes and does not change the character thereof. It shall not cause any noise, odors, effluent, smoke, dust, vibrations, electrical interference, bright or flashing light, or other objectionable conditions which would interfere with the quiet enjoyment of a residential neighborhood. A home occupation shall not include automobile or machine repair, welding, sheet metal, or other similar work, and shall not require regular or frequent deliveries of goods or materials of such bulk or quantity, nor the parking of customer or client vehicles in numbers or frequency over and above the normal traffic associated with the dwelling as a residence. It allows for one exterior sign, and display or stock and trade is limited to local articles and produce.
Does that one belong in commercial, or it almost sounds like it almost belongs in a residential zoning to me?
Well, these definitions and land uses are across the,
Oh, okay.
you know, across all zones.
So Walt, would you like it not permitted?
Pardon?
Would you like it not permitted? It currently is secondary.
Well, it kind of refers to a residential neighborhood. It seems awkward I'm wondering why it's even in this.
Because we're going through everything that
I got
for the
you.
whole town.
Okay, so this could affect other zonings, not just 18.
It affects all the zones. All of these definitions will impact all of the zones.
Oh, okay.
But we have a
Okay,
business centric focus
I
right
get
now.
it. Okay. I thought we were doing just, okay.
But what you have to be careful of is that it is permitted. And so when you said that it doesn't work for an accessory structure, it actually could.
I see what you're saying. Like you have like a
Because-
pergola or a shed and then.
Right, because there's no reason, I mean, if you have a potting studio, you can do that with just a bucket of water, but there's a lot of things that you can do to be in business in an accessory structure.
Like a farm stand?
Yeah, like any of those. So to me, it does, I mean, it is permitted and I can see why it would be permitted.
Well, it's
Try
probably
to-
second.
I don't want to point out anybody else because I got myself in trouble for doing that the other day. But it is, I mean, totally something that somebody could do and have a full-fledged business in an accessory structure. I don't think that there's.
Yes, but it's considered secondary in the commercial business district. And that I think if they were operating that,
Accessory user structure is permitted in a commercial business, right?
yes,
Okay.
but home occupation is secondary.
Could it be possible that this,
I gotcha.
oops, sorry.
Okay.
Could this just be not applicable? Because if you're running a business, it's just your business in the commercial business district. It's not necessarily a home occupation.
Yeah, that
Should,
actually might, yeah,
could we just write not applicable instead of secondary use?
well, it just becomes, right, so they would be not applicable for the business district, but that would be applicable for other districts.
Right.
We do have people that live in the commercial business district full time. And if they would like to run a business from home. Does that mean they'd have to, if they had a home occupation, would they have to have two businesses? Like if they have their home occupation and in order to be in the commercial business district, they also have to have a business.
So would it just be their business?
Right.
So then it's there, so then that falls under, so what that would do would fall under the accessory structure on it. Accessory user structure,
It's a dwelling or accessory structure.
right,
So look into further.
yep. I think, just be careful.
Yes.
This is. I'm glad.
I think that the it shall not cause any noise, odors, or, disturbances just isn't appropriate for the business district to conduct business. These things should be,
I mean, but if
allowed.
if there's like a man that wants to have, not necessarily a man, if there's someone that wants to have a welding shop in their garage, this is saying that they can't do that and they can't have that going on in the commercial business.
Yeah, and I'm
as a
saying,
home
I think-
occupation.
I think that makes sense in commercial residential, but I think it should not make sense in commercial business. You should be able to make a little noise in the business area of town, right?
I would almost think that falls under like industrial. What's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, a little bit of noise.
The
Well, depends on
grinding.
what business you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just make sure, I think it's the same as with some of these others, that maybe it takes a little bit more time to just cross-reference things and make sure that we're not eliminating current user or one that could potentially come up.
Anything else for home occupation? Okay, hostels, a budget-oriented, lower cost, short-term shared room dormitory. In quotations, accommodation that accepts individual travelers.
What is the current conditional use for that?
For hostel. It would just fall under the ordinary conditional use.
You would send out to the
And
neighbors.
based on occupancy, I believe that there are some additional building code requirements for hostel.
Okay, so we can look at that. We'll get.
But you might be able to just cover that under the nightly rental thing, as well as cabins,
Mhm.
like that. Because this one is conditional, and part of the conditional part of it might be based on occupancy.
Occupancy. is conditional use based on occupancy. And it's all under nightly rentals.
Do we have a hostel in Sylvania?
I don't think so.
Pardon?
I don't think so. No, but there are some individuals who have dreams of us having one here someday. Never know.
A possible definition that I know we're getting to this later, but I thought of could be just high capacity accommodations to include things like hostels, hotels, workforce lodgings, etc.
High capacity accommodations to include things like hostels, hotels, and workforce capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else under hostels? Okay, marijuana cultivation facility, manufacturing facilities, retail facilities, and testing facilities is conditional use across the board because they do have other permitting and regulations that are required of them. Sure.
I'm okay with it as conditional.
We're not gonna change that to a P.
Sure, as long as you meet all the conditional requirements.
Yeah. We do have to regulate that one a little bit. Due to its extraneous permitting. Okay. Moving to motel, hotel, a group of one or more detached or semi-detached buildings, two or more individual dwelling units or guest rooms designed for or temporarily used by automobile tourists or transient. This is a very old definition. With a garage attached or a parking space conveniently located to each unit, including, and this is for motel. So there's two different definitions, sorry. Motel, hotel. Motel is a group of one or more detached or semi-detached buildings containing two or more individual dwelling units and or guest rooms designed for or used temporarily by automobile tourists or transients with a garage attached or parking space conveniently located to each unit, including groups designated as auto courts, motor lodges, or tourist courts. Hotel, a building or group of buildings containing more than 5 guest rooms and used for the purpose of offering public lodging on a day-to-day basis with or without meals.
I think that you can clear that up with current definitions and building codes. And be very cognizant, you'll see it in the definitions, that you don't want to be changing the 5 or more units. They're there for a purpose. You also don't, same thing with the lodge. They're there for a purpose, and it all stems back to fire marshal codes, building codes, electric codes, all of those things. So just have to make sure that you don't inadvertently change that number, because then you totally change the use.
In one of the proposed packets, the hotel definition did change to 6 rooms.
Yes. And I think it was just probably an inadvertent thing, not realizing what the effect of that truly was with insurance. And that's the other thing that you have to be very mindful of, is that when those numbers are there for a reason. The folks that originally put them in did their research, because they are correct based on current regs.
Anything else for motel, hotel? Okay, next, kennel, commercial means premises where 4 or more dogs over 6 months of age are owned, kept, boarded, bred, and are offered for sale, not permitted in the commercial business district. I'm okay with that.
I think that it would have a very negative impact. In the commercial district. Well, depending on the amount of space you have. I
You said we need to make a little noise.
I'm gonna go sit in a strobe light in front of your house. So, I don't know, I agree with you, it's not.
I think it's correct leaving it with an N. Not allowed.
Anybody else? We'll go to lodge, contains 5 or fewer units, a building or group of building containing 5 or fewer guest rooms used for the purpose of offering public lodging on a day-to-day basis with or without meals. Check out the state of Alaska definitions.
It's correct.
It's correct. And that's good, permitted.
I would like it to stay permitted.
Okay.
Me as well.
Agreed.
Doesn't need any further discussion.
I think it would have a negative effect on our commercial business district and those that are in business if we changed it.
Okay. Anything else for lodge? Yes, Allison?
Yeah, was this where it came up where if you had a kitchen in your guest room that it changed the definition of being a lodge or something? Like, I think we gotta make sure that kitchens are okay, I guess, and not get so particular on what different services are provided in these guest rooms.
Through the chair, yes, that was one of the proposals in the previous draft ordinance. So that is not what is in the current definition, and it sounds like you're in agreement that it should stay the way it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So that means in the lodge, you could have a little kitchenette in the rooms. Oh, okay.
Or a full kitchen.
Or a full kitchen.
I would like to recommend that we add to this definition so that it's understandable how this definition differs from nightly rentals when we reassess how nightly rentals and a few of the other, overnight accommodations are going to be written. Because under this definition, it just includes nightly rentals, a lodge does. So I think perhaps clarification so that no further businesses, have confusion is necessary.
Okay. Anything else for lodge? Okay, moving down to offices then, a room or group of rooms used for conducting affairs of a business, profession, service, industry, or government. And right now it's secondary.
I think I'm okay with that.
So what's that saying is that's not necessarily a business, it's a support for other businesses, is what you're saying there.
I believe that was the intent, and so maybe that needs to be looked at further, and that it does not need to be defined. It's just a support for a business. Is it applicable in this?
I almost think so.
Okay.
Because if that offices almost becomes a service too, which is a permitted. So depending on what it is, and that's back to, you can't outline everything, so I think that it might be a really good idea, what Walt just said, it's an office could potentially be a permitted use, depending on what that office was for. But if it's as a accessory or something to something else, it may not be it.
A support building for.
Right. So to, yeah, to me, the word office, I think.
I think it should be permitted. I mean, we've already crossed the lines with Jerry's building and,
Well, you don't even have to,
You know-
you don't have to even.
because it's showing as secondary. Seemed to me like that should be permitted if it's a valid business.
Yeah,
That
and then that's back to, you have to come up with a definition for what businesses, and then in business.
Being in business.
May I think it should be permitted because, and I kind of actually like it as a secondary definition, because what if you have a business in Seldovia, for example, that needs land requirements that you don't have within the commercial business district. So let's say you were operating like, I don't know, ATV tours or something, and you needed, an office front downtown to cater to tourism, but your business is really run somewhere else. I think,
there's still things that could fall under.
yeah, okay.
Still be potentially retail if you're selling a service.
Right,
Or business or consumer service,
okay.
but looking at that definition of business. In business. Might be a start. Allison?
I think it should be permitted.
What she said.
Without it being secondary, it can be primary.
I mean, if it's conducting the affairs of a business, it may not even be needed, like Don suggested.
And to your, well, I mean, depending on what that business is that's running out of there, to your point, Elena, if it was something like an ATV tour, it could fall under commercial recreation or entertainment uses.
Okay.
Or services, or if they had needed a retail front. But yeah, pinpointing the definition of whether it's a business office or if it's an office building facility, other people's businesses would be helpful. I guess.
It's still a service. I mean,
If it's your own office, is it a service?
if you're renting office space,
If you're renting the office space, you're providing a service.
so that's your business. Right?
If it's that type of office.
Is that what you're? I don't know now.
Knowing what type of office it is, like by definition. But there are different types of offices.
Right, so then if you went up into your business services and your business personal services. And so that you don't inadvertently impact some of the other districts, so then you have to go and look at all of them, whatever you end up combining here. To make sure that you're still permitted to do the same things in those two, so if you were to take it out. You have to make sure that it's covered with whatever you leave in up here for the other districts.
Yes.
And so right now, it's secondary. So do we come back to this or do we try to figure this out?
We can come back to it, or if you have, I mean,
No, wait, we're already tried to do it. Yeah, I think we're coming back to.
yes, so I wrote support for business or as a service, can it be removed, permitted, or included as in business, and come back to it.
Can I also ask the question?
Sure.
Your city building
Uh-huh.
here, is that offices?
Mhm.
And you're providing that service for multiple businesses?
Mhm.
But on your land use table, is that not permitted?
Correct. Yep, that's something we need to evaluate as well as things have changed over time with city functions.
Happenings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was just like, everything is public and it is, I mean, it's public to an extent, it's open to all public to be able to rent and utilize.
So if
but-
the city has offices space, like if it's running a service business, I don't think we should restrict other people in the commercial business district from being able to have an office space. So I would be
Mhm.
okay having it as permitted for both commercial business and for the city public.
As the office space is the business.
So not secondary, but as a primary.
Anything else for offices? Okay, and moving down to restaurant. An establishment where food and drink is prepared, served, and consumed primarily within the principal building. And it's permitted use.
Where do food trucks fall? Would that be under a restaurant? Or do they have their own thing?
They don't, so maybe that's something that needs to be considered. That's that mobile, going back to that mobile business,
Mhm.
food trucks.
But I would consider a mobile business is different than a mobile home.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yes.
made a note of that and that, absolutely. Food trucks. Mobile business,
So a restaurant might include.
Let's look up the definition of a restaurant, because I think a restaurant, you have to. Really physically have a space for people to sit and use a restroom, but I'm not positive about that for sure. Short version.
We might want to consider a separate definition for
Pretty sure.
a food truck.
And I think a mobile business should be allowed on an unoccupied lot or an occupied lot.
She said a mobile business should be allowed on an occupied or unoccupied lot.
So how does that work in with, like, somebody that comes with an RV and they need a hookup, because isn't that an issue that you have to deal with? Because if they need sewer and water for to be a
Occupancy.
permitted use or occupancy,
Right.
that's I'm not saying not to do it,
Mhm.
but it's another thing that has to be.
Is
looked
that,
at.
is that something, do food trucks also do that?
So some of them hook up to water and sewer, depending on how they're set up. And some of them also have a gray water tank and a freshwater tank, so potable water system all built into them already.
Right,
So,
but they would still have to pay the city even if they don't hook up?
I don't know. I mean, but that is a thing. I mean, but you gotta be fair.
Right.
And all of this, and do I love food trucks? I do. Do I like mobile businesses? I think they're a lot of fun. But also remember that the people that are in the business district right now are paying taxes,
A
water and
ridiculous
sewer,
amount.
insurance, all of those things. So
I know.
How did Chris and Karen work their food truck?
as far as I know, they rented out the building behind them.
And then
And
they
then
just
just
had
operated
their,
the food truck.
oh, okay.
And I don't know if they were actually, were they hooked up to city water? And they didn't have sewer, right? They used the building behind them.
Correct.
And then they had a potable water tank in there. I don't think they were, or were they hooked up to city? No, they were hooked up to water, but they used, sanitation was.
That's
used
right.
The building.
Yeah, because when they were at the harbor, they were hooked up to that water and they paid the city for water and sewer when they were at the harbor because they were hooked up. And then when they moved, they were still supposed to be hooked up when they
Okay.
were across the street.
So it is something that.
And it's been a problem in the past in the city. So that is one thing. Recreational vehicles was something that we were looking at separately. Maybe I know that there are other communities that have also addressed this. And what I mean separately is just having an actual chapter that talks about what that is and what is a requirement. So that sounds like that needs
Because there are a lot of food trucks where, in there, it's getting to be more and more of a thing where it's living quarters in the front and they have their food truck in the back. Not that it's a bad thing, I mean, at all, but that is definitely something I think that you could potentially see here from time to time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, some cities have food truck communities, like
Uh-huh.
whole neighborhoods
oh,
of
they are
them.
so much fun. But sometimes the neighborhoods around us.
Well, they also have a larger population that can support multiple restaurants or food trucks.
Oh, I'm looking at the restaurant.
But yes, going back to our discussion for the land use, I think restaurants should be permitted.
and the consideration for a second, another category for.
Yeah, for a different type of eating establishment.
A mobile unit.
Okay. And then, are you still looking for that definition, Dawn, or should I move on?
You can move on.
Okay.
But yes, I was.
Just don't want to rush anybody. Retail business other than a home occupation, establishments engaged in selling goods or merchandise to the general public for business or personal household consumption and rendering services incidental to the sale of such goods.
Sounds good.
Could you expand on what rendering services incidental to the sale of such goods would entail? Like what services are they rendering in a retail business?
Like a delivery service? Would be a service that they could render from retail.
Could we just include this back in with the expanded definition of business services?
Possibly, except where it is not currently permitted in the residential special multifamily district where other businesses are.
That's a good consideration because they're.
Where are you?
Same with a couple of these that we have to be careful of when we go back to rediscuss them, is make sure that we don't negatively impact one of the others. And so
Right.
that's where, I think Elaine brought up, the not applicable might be a really useful tool. And when if we can't completely remove it or incorporate it into another definition and not impact it, but maybe not applicable. And it takes care of that, so that you don't have three things that are kind of very similar.
Yeah. Anything else for retail business?
It's adjacent to what we're discussing, but from the map that I have, the only residential special multifamily, the RSM district, that's just the
Correct.
housing. And they're allowed two different types of businesses, business consumer service versus business personal service from there, even though it's other than home occupation. Wouldn't anything that's coming from there be a home occupation?
Correct.
And if they do have access to do business there, that's not a home occupation, why wouldn't we allow them to do a retail business if they're doing other businesses? Or on the flip side, why would we allow them to do business there? As these are defined, if they could have a home, if they could just be classified under home business, which is permitted.
Yes, because they are all homes.
Right.
They're growing.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for the tangent.
It's a great tangent. These things, I mean, we're actively making note of them because that's the goal, right? The intent is to make it cleaned up. And yes, the focus is on business districts, but it also impacts the whole community. So
For sure.
great tangent. Anything else for retail business? Okay, we're moving down to wholesale business. Wholesale outlet, business conducted primarily for the purpose of selling wares or merchandise and wholesale lots to retail merchants for resale, and it is currently permitted.
I mean, I think it should be permitted, you
Okay.
know?
Differing or more,
I don't know what, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things that could fall under wholesale. And I feel like there might be a handful of wholesale businesses that I don't think need to be in a commercial business district. That would support our idea of town center facilitating locals and tourism alike and having it be this vibrant section. To have this large wholesale establishment. I think that would depend on what it is that they're wholesaling and who they're wholesaling to.
I'd like a Costco.
I think at that point they'd be considered retail.
Permitted.
Allison, did you have a comment?
I was thinking that this could be added to all the other business types that we've tried or thinking about consolidating. But after hearing the discussion, I don't know that that's a good idea anymore. So, yeah.
I think the difference is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a direct to consumer. It's not a direct consumerism business.
Unless you go to a city and there's wholesale outlets. And then they're like the outlet store for these larger companies that have wholesale items.
So in a smaller scale, that could be an art studio or something that isn't open to the public, but is providing goods for sale throughout our community, which we have some of those. I don't know what their actual residence is, but
More people thinking about
we have
sweaters.
be very careful that we don't eliminate because we're scared of what might happen, because I think that one of the things we can always go back and revisit, but you never want to squash some idea
For
from
sure.
the get-go, so. There's always on both sides going to be the thing that's like, but the fact of the matter is. Probably somebody that starts a wholesale something here is not going to
Smaller
buy
scale.
5 lots. Right? They're gonna do that elsewhere, I'll be cheaper for them.
Allison, do you have something to add?
Well, could it be conditional use then? If it sounds like there's concern here that it be a certain type of wholesale business.
It's all, if it's like Don said, and it's a real small business, that's a lot of work and process to put someone through if they're selling thread or something for the quilt makers, for instance. You know, it has to do with a great big wholesale business or a little, you know, mom and pop deal that
Yeah.
buying stuff and selling it wholesale. I think we have to look at the likelihood. We're probably not going to see Sam's Club or Costco anytime soon. You know, so I don't know that it'd be a fear, but I'd hate to squish some anything little company coming up, you know,
For sure.
that we don't want to scare anything away if we could help it.
I'm okay with it staying permitted.
I am too.
Anything else? Any differing opinions? Moving down to automotive repair, service and sales. I did make a point to evaluate evaluate combining.
Commercial garage.
Yeah. I think the difference on this one was, fuel sales or like selling parts, fuel, things for a vehicle that you're not using the garage as a service. It doesn't have to be a garage for the automotive repair and sales. So looking at that versus garage, we can look into that further.
I thought it might be just automotive sales was the difference because the repair and services could fall under commercial garage.
So would you remove garage or you remove?
I
Automotive.
would name it automotive sales.
And just remove garage, because garage could also be other things. We'll look at it. So we don't have to work it out tonight.
Is the definition here useful for people who are servicing cars on their home property without any garage? Is that why this is here?
Well, it would depend on if they were getting paid for services.
And it doesn't have to be a garage, right? So if you have a fuel station, if you have a
Fuel station falls under this?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look at the rest of it, but that's what my mind goes to. If you're selling parts, automotive parts, if we have an automotive part shop.
Selling
even-
oil. Maybe that's.
Yeah.
Oil, antifreeze.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Or selling cars, so.
It's
I do
not
that.
selling actual cars, and they don't have to have a garage. I don't know. We can look into it. What those differences are. One's a garage specific and the other is just a general sales related to automobile.
They could have a
As we get
showroom.
Further down, it would
Yeah.
get more punchy.
Below that, we have equipment sales, repairs and service. So that's for heavy equipment or machine specific, the use of any building or structure and associated premises on which a business, service or industry involving that maintenance, servicing repair, painting, or for the display and sale of heavy equipment or tangible property that is used in the operation of a business, devices, machines, tools, and vehicles. It's not permitted in the commercial business district, and I do believe, if I was gonna make an assumption, this is in here because it's more directly related to the industrial zone.
Right, and much more permitting as soon as you bring paint into the equation, so.
And it is listed under industrial land use types.
So then back to the.
But let's say somebody had bought a, one of the properties in the commercial business district. Would this mean that they're not allowed to run from that a business that would repair, I don't know, motors or anything, that they would then have to buy another property outside of the business district to run that specific business because it's not allowed?
For heavy equipment specific. They could do car motors and truck motors conditionally with a commercial garage. And then there's a different one for boat motors under marine equipment sales and service, which is permitted.
Is that okay?
And actually, when you talk about large equipment, I don't believe that there is any lot that would be big enough. And I would have to look, but I don't think.
I mean, once SNA's building goes down, they could probably.
That is true.
Put in some heavy equipment, because we have parked heavy equipment out there before to
That's true.
show kids, like,
Yeah, so
this is a
right,
loader.
There is lots that could do it, so.
Okay, so this is only in terms of very large machinery.
Yes.
Okay.
You want to
Okay,
bring
no
in the
problem.
excavators and dump trucks and.
Okay.
Anything else for equipment sales, repairs and services, heavy equipment or machine?
I'm okay with that not being downtown.
Now, this next one, I do not know the history of how this ended up in the code. I'm sure there is a reason for it. But it is an interesting definition. So I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on it. Extraction of natural resources for sale, not incidental to development of the area for a permitted use, surface or subsurface. Subsurface extraction of natural resources, removing valuable minerals or other geological materials from the earth from an ore body, vein, or coal seam. Materials recovered could include gas, oil, base metals, precious metals, iron, uranium, coal, diamonds, limestone, oil, shale, rock salt, and potash. Surface extraction of natural resources, the removal of material, usually soil, gravel, or sand for use at another location. And if I remember correctly, this is not permitted anywhere in the city across any distance. You cannot extract in
It
the
is not
city of
permitted.
Philadelphia.
Heidi, if I find gold under one of these houses, I'm gonna break that law.
Not allowed.
You don't have the mineral rights. That wasn't in your.
You don't know that.
I'm actually pretty sure.
That possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yeah. Mineral rights.
Yeah,
That's a great
I
thing.
asked Chance about this. And his idea was someone buying a lot just to remove the timber, to blow into the ground, get out the gravel. You have a rock pit. Yeah, do fill, like, we could take down Caps Hill and take away all the land, like, to fill in other places. You can't sell your hill.
Yeah.
But that was the extent of his ideas.
I think that it also does, that as well as mineral rights, which when they rezoned everything, I'm sure that they specifically took out the rights, the mineral rights. That's what bothered.
So who has them?
Huh?
So
They
who's-
just might not be permitted. It might not be anybody that has them.
I'm okay with it not being permitted.
Okay. Anything else on that? Any differing opinions? It could be, I know, for instance, out the road, Sildovia Native Association has the mineral rights under my property, so. It could be the borough, I'm not sure who has it under the city, I don't have city property, be something to look into.
Interesting.
Okay. Moving on, we've got a gas station, so it does have its own. The use of any building or structure and associated premises or other space used primarily for the retail sale and dispensing of motor fuels, tires, batteries, and other small accessories, the installation and servicing of such lubricants, tires, batteries, and other small accessories, and such other services which do not customarily or usually require the services, so not service specific of a qualified automotive mechanic.
If you need the automotive mechanic, go to the commercial garage.
Correct. And currently, gas station is not permitted in the commercial business district.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I agree with that also.
Okay. Any differing, any further comments, notes?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
If somebody wanted to run a business where they brought gas from another, let's say Homer, via a boat for sale, and I think you said that the dock is considered part of the commercial business district, would that be not allowed?
The dock, I believe, is industrial.
It
Let's
is.
double check on that, and it is permitted in the industrial zone. where
It
the dock
is. Because I think that type of business venture should definitely be allowed. And if it is, that's great.
Currently under industrial. Double check on that. That's where it's at.
The gas station is conditional in commercial and industrial, otherwise not permitted in any other district.
Yeah, and I'm sure that that is another one because there is a tremendous amount of permits that are required to do that legally.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would be able to sell your gas that you privately purchased in Homer and brought over. You would be able to use your gas if you had like an ATV business. But I don't think you could sell 5-gallon jugs of gas as retail.
I'm assuming there are restrictions there. Not read up on this.
Okay, so we're going with, it's fine the way it is. If there's anything else. Any differing opinions? Correct. Okay, and moving on, junkyard, any space 100 square feet or more of any lot or parcel of land used for storage, keeping, or abandonment of junk or waste material, including scrap metals or other scrap material, or for the dismantling, demolition, or abandonment of automobiles, other vehicles, machinery, or any parts thereof not permitted in commercial business district.
Let me go back.
Yes,
Sorry,
no,
when I'm listening to some of that and you reread this,
mhm,
gas station, that's not. When you read into it, you get to small accessories, the installation and servicing of such lubricants, tires, batteries, and small accessories. As soon as it says small, to me, that doesn't. Because those things can happen in our.
so the definition needs to be reevaluated to be fuel specific.
I think so,
Okay,
and maybe not, I don't.
You're concerned with small accessories?
It's just that those things are definitely things that would be able to, but the gas is an issue, but the accessories are not within ours, and so it's just the definition of gas station and that actual definition don't match up to me at all.
Well, I'm with you. There's a lot of instances, like in a little grocery store, there's a lot of auto stuff there.
But wouldn't that just be considered a retail business? With retail goods?
But you're saying that this stuff isn't allowed, so that's what I'm saying, that the definition doesn't match what it is.
Some of those things may need to be deleted or,
Yeah.
you know, like if Tata wanted to sell antifreeze, I'm gonna go buy it. You know, and if it's not, you know, someone says, well, no, you can't do that here. It's not a, yeah, we may want to reword that where we don't
Yeah, I think
exclude
that's one of
something.
the things that there's actually a lot of people when they come to town would really like there to be is a fishing tackle store and that has a few things to repair motors, or if they need to grab a jug of oil, things like that.
It's a two sided.
So, yeah.
Well,
And so
they
it's-
even sell,
It's not that it's just the gas station along with that definition doesn't match up to me.
well, they even sell canned gas, believe it or not. You can get canned gas and I'm assuming you can resell that.
If it's properly sealed by the distributor, yeah.
Correct.
They sell it mixed, pre-mixed like that, yeah, for
So
people
maybe-
like me that don't want to be responsible for blowing up.
Maybe it's specific to dispensing and selling fuel.
Yeah.
So we can look at what some of other definitions are that would fit that need. Okay, dispensing and selling.
Do we need to let the public speak?
I don't think there's anybody from the public.
Public, it's the last 3 minutes, right? Are we there already?
Yeah, so if you guys are wanting to be time certain. We do have quite a bit left, so we can pause and bring this back at the next meeting if you guys.
Do we even have anybody from the public who is here to comment?
Not at this time, but we should still open it up just in case somebody's, I don't know, on YouTube.
Nobody has nobody has pre-signed up.
Can we
Or-
just finish? I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can just go through it. And then if we need to discuss it further, like, you know, put that, but I think we should try to finish this last little bit.
We've got a whole nother front and back side page after
Oh,
that six.
wait.
Yes.
Oh,
But
Mine's done.
I'm okay with continuing to go.
well, mine doesn't have the backside. here.
Mine go for mine.
So,
Okay,
That's
so
why I did
I'm on
this.
page 4.
I know it looks ridiculous.
okay. Okay, well
We
then,
got like 2.5 more pages.
okay, well, if we have 2.5 more pages, maybe, because I do want to
We
adjourn,
can
but
finish this page.
yeah, I think we should just finish this page. I thought we were at the end, because see, I don't have,
There's 2 more full.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we had a printer error. Sorry about that, guys. Mine has them all. That's weird.
Well, let's just finish page 4. How about
Okay.
that?
We can finish page 4. Next one is junkyard.
I am happy to not have a junkyard in commercial business.
I second that.
I like junk.
You're outvoted right now.
Uh,
Anything further with junkyard?
This is very off topic, but it is permitted in industrial. I was just looking at that
Uh-huh.
zoning, which might want to be looked at because there's so many residential homes around that area. If you had a junkyard there, I don't know, it could contaminate water.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to not allowing junkyards.
I was just teasing. I do like to go to a good junkyard, but I don't.
Well, I mean, I think in the commercial business district, no junkyards. I think if it's allowed in the industrial and there's the residences around that, I think, because we're just discussing the commercial business. If it needs to be changed somehow for industrial, then I think it should be discussed separately
Additional,
as
yeah.
for industrial.
Right.
You know,
That's like the note about
Yeah,
residential, special multi, you know, it's
Yeah.
a good note for us to, I'm putting them
Yeah.
on the side off. It's a good thing for us
Yeah.
administratively to carry through that evaluation.
yeah.
Agreed. So, and yeah, definitely if you guys see those things, feel free to still point them out and I'll just put them to the side as not specific to this group, but something that's noticed that does need to be addressed in the future. Okay, so junkyard not permitted. If there isn't anybody with any other notes or differing opinions, we'll move on. Lumberyard is also not permitted, and that's an establishment that sells sawn, timber, and other building materials typically stored on the premises.
I'm okay with it not being permitted.
Not seeing any differing opinions on that.
I'm just thinking where you could store
Yeah.
on any of the lots where you're gonna put it. So
So, give me
I said, on the lumber yard, on some of the lots, it's like you don't really have enough space to store a bunch of lumber.
I mean, but even if they did have the space, that's not something I want to see in
Yeah.
downtown Philadelphia.
we do have a sawmill,
You're not the only ones in Philadelphia with a sawmill.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We don't have the, that would need to be in an industrial or somewhere where there's a lot more room.
Okay, moving on, manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly, the mechanical or chemical transformation of materials or substances into new products, including assembling of component parts, the manufacturing of products, and the blending of materials such as lubricating oils, plastics, resins, or liquors. And at this point, that is a conditional use for commercial business district. I think that kind of goes along the lines of wholesale. You're creating, manufacturing things.
Right.
And
So
it's
that's interesting because based on the definition, it doesn't give you a scale. But I do lots of things with 2-part epoxy. We repair boats with 2-part epoxy, so with those resins, things like that. But I think that probably the intent that maybe should be clarified is the scale at which that is taking place. If kind of picking at things, but if we're looking at things, we might as well look at them all.
Yeah. And that it's like the primary or business use, because that's, you're not using 2-part epoxy as your primary business use. But I see what you're saying, because you could do like the cup making, that's retail.
Tables.
Would
Table.
she need to
Which
get
I-
permitting to do resins?
Right, that's what
Yeah.
it doesn't quite, I mean, you can,
Yeah.
it depends
As a
on if
primary
somebody
use.
wants to, I mean,
As
it's
a-
just better to clarify.
Yeah. I like that. Okay.
Yeah, and on that note, not that it would ever happen, but would you want a plastics, factory of a large scale in your downtown?
I'd rather have a lumber yard than a plastic.
Good thing, like, that maybe you define that by scaling
Okay.
it somehow.
Yes, I'm okay with it as conditional.
I am too.
So the guy in the little barn, what is the little
Yeah.
business? What does he make? And he
3D
makes
printing.
something out of,
He has a 3D printer and he makes a whole bunch of little knickknacks.
what kind of material?
Plastic.
Plastic
Melted
material.
plastic.
So scale.
So back to scaling.
So he kind of falls under that one.
He does.
Boy, I'm glad we're doing this exercise. Marine equipment, sales, service, repair, construction, storage, the use of any building or structure and associated premises on which a business, service, or industry involving the maintenance, servicing, repair, painting, or for the display and sale of rental of large boats is a marine service station. Major or minor vessel repair or the sale and rental of small boats, parts, and accessories, and that is permitted.
See, that's pretty wild to me.
But if you go back.
Exactly.
to The
I know what the goal of,
goal of what it was supposed to,
The marine specific.
but it's not the things can't change, but it
Right.
is why it is the thing when you. You can't just look at this, you gotta see the whole picture, otherwise you get.
right.
So does it need to change? I guess that's the
Right.
question.
What do you consider a large boat? I mean, are we getting
I mean.
the Laura S out here on a lot where they can
Mhm.
service it, do repair and
And that
On
might
the lot
be
next door to my
actually
rental.
a really great thing for tourism.
it could be.
People are excited about seeing that stuff because those boats look huge. So, I mean, it's a thing.
Yes.
Is there the place for space? Is that the proper
Right.
area? And if you look at. You know, the automotive repair, if you look at garage, commercial, those are all considered conditional. In that district.
Right.
So just something to consider if that is still applicable. Where we are today as a society and community.
Maybe just looking at it more like we're doing with the other things to see when you cross-reference and if you can scale it somehow, or if it's even necessary to do so based on property size, because that's the other thing that's going to stop it from happening, is just sheer property size. If you have enough property to do it.
We just had a boat built.
Mhm.
And it's fiberglass, and it is inside of a big warehouse. I don't know if we should have a fiberglass warehouse on Main Street. It's pretty industrial. I am not opposed to having boat maintenance. I think that's great, but I don't know if
I think it's the scale thing.
I think
Because there's people that could make a canoe, they could do, which also is gonna take all the same things and are, I mean, I don't think. We would ever not permit that.
but it says of large boats.
Decide what that.
Like
large
how
boat
big,
is.
how big of a boat are we doing?
The Guardian.
Yeah, it's the scale.
Well, you know, Jerry brings some pretty big boats into that little warehouse that he has. And they work on them there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always throughout the year, 3 or 4 or 5 different boats that come in there.
I mean, I'm currently okay with it being permitted because like
Yeah.
you were saying earlier, we don't want to squash the little guy that wants to come in and do something cool. I don't think anyone is going to choose downtown as the right place to manufacture fiberglass boats.
But
But
you just never know.
You never
So
do know.
we can look at the definition and scale and see what we can formulate from that. The whole goal of this conversation is to bring back at the next, maybe not the next meeting, because we'll have some definitions to still cover, or maybe we can at least start it. But to, based on these comments and notes, bring back more information that can help guide the conversation to really start making those determinations.
sure. And like aside from fiberglass, aluminum boats, that's a lot of loud industry.
I think that these lots, like you're saying, are going to be too small for that type of a venture, but I think it should be permitted just because you only have the industrial area and the can't speak, commercial business area that is in a very nice close proximity to the water, you know, where you would have to launch boats near the dock.
I mean,
And that
it's,
needs to be taken into account for a business like
Um,
that.
it is permitted in the waterfront, commercial, residential, commercial, industrial, commercial business, and commercial residential districts.
Right, but if you were going to open a business like that, would you want to be on a side street on the slough where you have to negotiate those tiny roads, or are you gonna wanna be downtown? Near.
I won't wanna be
Places where you
downtown.
can launch.
I'd be over in industrial over by the boatyard.
Right,
So I made a note on that one to look across the districts. I mean, we'll do that for all, but I mean, I think especially for this one with the scaling and definition and just making sure where it's indicated permitted or not permitted right now matches. Anything else on marine equipment, service, repair, construction and storage? I think it's just also a very big category personally, when I read that title, that's a very big category. So maybe some of those things might fall under some of the other categories like business.
my only hesitation of not permitting it would be that it would greatly enhance many businesses here in Seldovia if somebody did come in and want to do this. It's been talked about a lot. So I don't know how many properties are for sale in the industrial area, or if they are oftentimes for sale. I just think by including commercial business, you're giving more opportunity for that to happen.
Just. Now we just need to go back and just make sure the definition fits okay, but I definitely think it should be permitted, you know, so. Just not, you know. Bunch of chemicals and you know, and then if you have those, then it would have to be, if there's regulations on it, then it would have to be conditional. If you had you were using certain things, so.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time around boatyards and boats and. Yes, I don't know.
I agree that it's not congruent with tourism, but you know, it's the commercial business has to include all business. And we do have a lot of marine business.
For sure.
Doesn't have to include all business though, because there are a lot of businesses we've just said no.
Okay. But we need to be mindful of many businesses besides tourism.
No, I think it would be great for tourism.
I think people are interested in it. I mean, the boat for sale parked across from us. I see tourists stop and look at that boat almost every single day. So,
I mean, but some of the categories were loud noises and metal cutting and grinding and like there's a lot of that happens when you're working on boats.
Definitely.
Okay, so we will definitely look into that one further. And we have 2 definitions left for today. Mini storage facility, a completely enclosed structure containing 3 or more areas or rooms available for lease or rent for the purpose of general storage of household goods, vehicles, or personal property, where the leasing of the unit is provided direct access to deposit or store items, and where vehicles do not fill the majority of the allowed storage space.
The property that the natives have on, that they're fenced around, is that in the commercial business?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
See, when I was looking at that and talking to the gal, that was one of the thoughts I had, was putting a little bit of storage in there, little mini warehouses inside that building before it got so bad. We don't have any, period. And there's a lot of people here. Hey, I need to store my paddleboard, my this, my that. I'm wondering if we're missing some business by not having at least under a conditional use or
secondary.
maybe secondary, if your lot's big enough to accommodate some little 4-foot. I just think we're throwing away some good business there that,
Yeah, and keep in mind, so this would be the primary purpose. You're saying somebody would just open up a storage unit lot in the commercial business district as their primary business.
I think it should at least go conditional so that,
Or secondary. We have a lot.
or
of things
secondary, if there's
secondary
a
in this
place
district.
where it's not visibly, really an eyesore, a nice little,
Right,
it'd be like an accessory building, but rent them out.
right.
And it just seems like a waste, because I have friends that, hey, where can I store this?
Mhm.
I said, nowhere.
I was gonna say, we do have one of those businesses.
But not in a commercial.
But anyway, I think rather than just, I think we ought to maybe include that.
Okay.
I think storage is definitely, yes, and needed thing.
So I made a note, change to conditional or secondary. Any other notes, comments, differing opinions on that one? No, then we'll get to the last one for this page for today. Two more at the next meeting, 2 more pages. And that one is utility public facility. It used to be public utility plants. That's the note there. An installation owned by an agency under public franchise or ownership or under certificate of convenience and necessity, providing the public with electricity, gas, heat, steam, communication, water, sewage, collection, or other similar service. I would throw a note in there that something on this side, maybe not for this specific group, but for consideration that's been brought up in the past is communication towers. We do not have that in our current code, but that is something that is definitely being addressed nationwide. So that's more a note for myself, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I just don't really like the word sewer collection in the commercial business district.
You don't want us to put a treatment facility right here?
If someone was to offer, a place to do, laundry or does that go under water and steam? Or is that just completely under a different title definition?
That's a great question. I think that the definition is trying to get more towards energy or resources. So maybe we can evaluate that definition to
It
make
was
sure
like
it's
hard
meeting.
if somebody put in a dry cleaner because of the chemicals, it's a completely different permitting process. So.
And if we go to electric cars, I may want to be selling some electricity.
Yeah, but are you a public facility then? Are you?
Punchy, we're getting punchy.
Yeah, I mean, you have to consider that it is an installation owned by an agency under a public franchise or ownership. So like HEA, Alaska Communication, they're public.
Like our power plant.
Yes.
Well,
Well, start a power plant.
please do. Affordable.
We will support you.
Just not in the commercial business.
In New Mexico, the governor, they're going to all electric vehicles in 2029 for government.
I don't know how they would fare here.
Well, I know, but if they force it and
Generators.
I may want to put a couple of plug-ins and sell power. I mean, they do it all over the United States. We better put conditional on there just in case.
Okay, so you just said you said something that just makes some sense, though. I mean, somebody comes over here with their electric car on the fair. I know
No
you are
place to plug it
brilliant,
in.
Walt. Brilliant.
I want to have the first plug.
I want you to. I want you to have the first one.
Everybody remember that.
There may be some
You are the
public
writer of
entities already
these
looking into
ideas.
that. No, just kidding. Other public entities.
Um, I think to have a public facility utility, to have a washroom, like if you had. Because somewhere I've read about having multiple washing machines or public use showers or something. I don't remember it being in this land use table.
Yeah, I think usually identify them as washaterias.
Mhm. And it is in the city CIP, as a potential capital improvement project for a collaboration. In the
Well-
future, it's to have a washateria.
There's even a thing when you're paying water and sewer,
Mhm.
maybe with the city, like if you have more than an X amount.
There used to be, and when the code was updated to a flat rate service and took away it used to be evaluated by office, bathroom, washer and dryer for laundry mats. I mean, there was some,
Oh, it's not there anymore.
it's not there anymore. It's the definitions have been simplified to be by service. So if somebody wanted to operate a laundromat in the city of Sladovia right now, and that was their only service in their building, then that would be a small, or no, that'd be a base rate residential, right? If they were operating two services, so a laundromat is something else.
If that was in the business district, it would be a base rate business.
Right,
Not residential, right?
base rate commercial. And so, yeah, and then if they had a second service on top of that, like a laundromat and a retail store, whatever,
Laundromat and an ice cream shop.
a laundromat and ice cream shop like we've had in the past, then it would be small commercial. You get into 3 or 4 more services, then it becomes large. So currently, not restricted. That's something that was done historically, that's been changed.
Where
And
would it fall under?
probably in business.
Perfect.
That's just not a
You're just
public
solving all kinds of
franchise.
problems.
Okay, anything else on today's table? And if you guys, since we're gonna keep discussing this as we go, and we have a couple more pages even, so if you have a wild idea in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., jot it down, and turn it into us, and we will keep, these notes together as we go through this process. Help guide further conversation, so. It's not the end all be all, definitely, as you come across things, let us know.
What do you consider the kiosks? Where do they fall?
Retail,
Okay, and that's also not permitted on that.
correct,
Is that something that will be addressed?
yes. Note has been made. That whole, I think, public district needs to be reevaluated, it sounds like. It's just been the way it's always been, and things have changed. So. Turn it over to you.
Okay, I don't see anybody for public comment.
No, we don't have anybody signed up
Okay.
for online public comment and nobody's in the room.
So I guess just the next thing is to figure out what day the next meeting is, and I can't remember, did we say the 29th?
Yeah, we had said the 29th, so maybe just pull a group and see if that's.
I'll be out of town. But that's
Okay. So, yes,
I'll be here.
so is the 29th gonna work, or do we need to maybe figure that out for another day, or?
It looks like we have maybe 3 people that won't be able to attend.
Okay,
which isn't any different than tonight.
yeah,
Proceed, and if it becomes a big
okay,
inconvenience for people, reevaluate.
okay, then we'll just set it for the 29th and until if something else happens, then we can change it. And Liz will be in contact.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and if we can't do the 29th, we'll probably have to push it to December meeting.
okay.
At that point.
So Marcia, I'm sure had done a lot of work on this. So is there a way, because we're not supposed to talk amongst one another, so is there a way that she can get that information to you too? So that it can be incorporated in there somehow, or can we?
Yeah.
share with information that happened at this meeting or not?
Both. She can give us her information and we can disseminate it to everybody. We're just a conduit to you guys. So, because everybody should have the same information in the end, right? It's just done through a public setting. So she can give it to us and we can disseminate it to you guys and provide it at the next meeting so that it's public. As well as this information that we gained tonight has been recorded and is on that. I just did it as we went and I can send that out to everybody as well, including Marcia.
Okay, we'll get her input. It's
I also just wanted to point out, I had Liz print out some tax.
Oh.
information.
Yeah, just we didn't get to what was in the laydown, but we did, there is a memo in there about the assessment process for the differences between residential and commercial property assessments that the borough does. And related to that, Ecola wanted to print out the pages that have the mill rates and the sales tax information. So those are available also if people want to take a copy of those. I feel like that might come up in discussion at our next meeting at this point.
Okay, cool. Well, meeting adjourned. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Are we gonna do it 5 again?